Well, welcome back, everybody. This, I believe, is my last official recorded lecture. And I don't know about you, but I'm pretty excited about it. It's on meaning and purpose. And I know that the schedule was a little bit different. And so John added a lovely video on vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue that I hope you all are going to watch and get some good, helpful, useful information from. And this video, we're going to talk a little bit about meaning and purpose and how it can impact our happiness and maybe our job satisfaction, since we're talking about you all as educators. We're going to start off with one of my favorite songs. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a catchy little video. I almost played you a live version, but I actually really like Jewel in her non-live version of this particular song. It's not one that I think a lot of people know, but the album is something that helped me find meaning and purpose, perhaps, in my younger years. So let's go to the song. It is called Life Uncommon. And of course, if you're not into my music, you can just skip on through that.
Don't worry, mother, it'll be alright. Don't worry, sister, say your prayers and sleep tight, and it'll be fine. Lover of mine, it'll be just fine. And lend your voices only to sounds of freedom. No longer lend your strength to that which you wish to be free from. Fill your lives with love and bravery, and you shall lead a life uncommon. I've heard your anguish, I've heard your heart's cry out. We are tired, we are weary, but we aren't worn out. Set down your chains till only faith remains. Set down your chains and lend your voices only to sounds of freedom. No longer lend your strength to that which you wish to be free from. Fill your lives with love and bravery, and you shall lead a life uncommon. There are plenty of people that pray for peace, but if praying were enough, it would have come to be. Let your words enslave no one, and the heavens will hush themselves to hear our voices ring out clear with sounds of freedom, the sounds of freedom. Come on, you unbelievers, move out of the way. There is a new army coming, and we are armed with faith. And to live, we must give. To live and lend our voices only to sounds of freedom. No longer lend our strength to that
All right. Sorry about that. Maybe maybe that's not your jam, but I don't know. It kind of is like a protest song to me, maybe, or just an idea about, I think I'm really the lyrics lend our voices or don't lend your voice to that which you wish to be free from. And so that kind of makes me think about where can I put my energy and put it into things that are what I believe in, and not spending time on the stuff I can't change and that, you know, isn't ultimately a part of what's valuable in my life. So I also kind of, the line in the beginning says, we are tired, we are weary, but we aren't worn out. I don't know about you. I know it's the summer, so maybe you're not feeling that tired and weary as educators, but I know certainly for me, when I have worked in schools, that is those lines would resonate with me at that moment. I also think about the altruism part, and to live we must give, and a lot of you talked about how your favorite way of increasing happiness is to give to others. So all right, moving on. So we're going to talk about meaning, and I want to make sure I didn't skip a slide. Nope, I didn't. Okay. Meaning it's a little hard to define. So meaning is sort of this, it can be known as an important or worthwhile quality. Sometimes a synonym is purpose. In the therapy world, or in counseling, we think of existential therapy, and that our client, whatever meaning is derived from our world, is given to it by the individual. You come to therapy, and kind of like that spirituality piece that we talked about, you know, it's up to you to decide how you make meaning in the world. For purpose, the definition is the reason for which something is done or created, or why something exists. A purpose, a person's sense of resolve or determination. You know, I'm often told that I walk with purpose. I have places to go, or an abiding intention to achieve a long-term goal that is both personally meaningful and makes a positive mark on the world. That last one is sort of what we think about. I think I know what's on the next slide, but okay, so trigger warning on this. You're going to get to hear about sort of the philosophy of meaning from primarily the perspective of Viktor Frankl, who spent several years in a concentration camp. And this video, a good part of the beginning of it, shows some images from that and some video from that. So just be aware that that's coming.
The meaning of life is to give life meaning. What keeps a human being going? The purest answer to this question is perhaps to be found in the worst of places. Austrian psychiatrist, philosopher and author Viktor Frankl spent 3 years in 4 different concentration camps. He was at the mercy of sadistic SS guards and the so-called kapos, prisoners with special privileges, who willingly collaborated with the Nazis and were even more ruthless than their masters. The camp inmates were constantly exposed to famine, sickness, slave labor, and the possibility of punishment or execution. There was no freedom. The prisoners moved around like a defenseless flock of sheep, kicked and beaten by their shepherds, stripped of all human dignity. What's left to live for in such a horrible place like a concentration camp? When they've taken all your liberties and possessions, and when death at short notice is almost inevitable, is there any reason not to give up on life? Viktor Frankl concluded that there's always a reason to live, even in the worst conditions. There's always meaning in suffering. And if we can grasp this meaning, this star in the sky, we can overcome even the most painful circumstances. According to Viktor Frankl, it's not pleasure nor success and power that essentially drives people. It's finding something, a purpose, a meaning to live and even die for. What's the purpose of my life? What's the meaning of all this? These questions echo the current societal condition, predominantly in the Western world, in which our lives seem to revolve around working a meaningless job to earn money so we can buy stuff as a means to dull our sense of meaninglessness. During times of globalization, secularization, and relative peace, we're less likely to find meaning in being part of a tribe, religious community, or defending our countries and loved ones against neighboring enemies. Everything has become so dull, so pointless, that we engage in rampant consumerism and distraction just to not feel a deep-seated sense of purposelessness that plagues our existence. And before we know it, nihilism kicks in, and we begin to ask ourselves, what's the point? Why keep going? You cannot compare the circumstances of the modern-day Westerner with those who lived in the concentration camps during the Second World War. But oddly enough, we walk around with similar existential questions and have similar reasons for giving up on life altogether. The lack of purpose, hopelessness, meaninglessness. When we're trapped in what Viktor Frankl called the existential vacuum, what awaits us is despair. During his days in the concentration camps, he noticed a division between two kinds of people, those who had given up on life and those who had not. The first group was more prone to illness and death. The second group was more likely to survive. The difference? A sense of meaning, or more specifically, the discovery of purpose in their unbearable living conditions. For example, Frankl himself was a doctor and found purpose in helping the inmates who suffered from illnesses. One day, he refused an opportunity to escape the camp so he could stay with his patients. He wasn't motivated by money, status, power, or even freedom. His purpose, in his case, taking care of his fellow human beings and not abandoning them, was so important to him that he was willing to die for it. His life had become a sacrifice of most profound significance. On the other end, Frankl wrote about those who collapsed under the harsh conditions of the camp. They always had the same reasoning for giving up, and I quote, "There's nothing anymore to expect from life." End quote. Devoid of meaning and faith that things could turn out more favorable, our bodies and minds begin to wither as we have lost our will to live. Frankl wrote about a prisoner who had dreamt about the end of the war and his release. His dream also revealed the date on which the liberation would happen, March 13th, 1945. He was full of hope. But when March 13th finally passed, nothing happened. As the prisoner's prophecy was naive and he had no purpose within the context of his imprisonment, he was struck with disappointment, suddenly got ill and died of typhus shortly after. But looking at the horrible and hopeless circumstances that some people find themselves in, is it fair to expect that they find meaning? Aren't some situations simply too overpowering? So much so that they eliminate one's responsibility to choose. When the war was over, Frankl reflected on the validity of human liberty during the horrors of the concentration camps. He concluded that we are indeed able to preserve a vestige of spiritual freedom and of independence of mind, even in such terrible conditions of mental and physical stress. Thus, we always have a choice. I quote, "We who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts, comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." End quote. The ruthless capos without morality, the sadistic SS guards with no respect for human life, the prisoners who lost their will to live, the guards who tried to help the inmates, those who found meaning in the deepest of suffering, they were all responsible for their life choices. Hence, regardless of how terrible life is, we still can and must decide in what direction we go. Do we choose to betray our people and commit brutal acts to escape torture and death in the concentration camps? Do we choose to succumb to peer pressure and hateful ideologies? Do we choose to embrace a nihilistic, destructive mindset due to living in a consumerist society that seems spiritually and morally bankrupt? Do we choose to become a plaything of our circumstances? According to Frankl, the spiritual freedom we have, which cannot be taken away, makes life meaningful and purposeful. I quote, "The way in which a man accepts his fate and all the suffering it entails, The way in which he takes up his cross gives him ample opportunity, even under the most difficult circumstances, to add a deeper meaning to his life." End quote. Imagine having to get out of bed every morning without a meaningful long-term goal. The only reason you get up is that you have to get to work and engage in activities you don't like, just to financially support a meaningless existence and the many pointless pleasures to cope with it. You blame your past, parents, circumstances, and even your genetics for not having anything going for you. But in reality, you can still transcend your predicament and find purpose despite any external situation. The question is, of course, how? Before we get into that how of meaning, it's helpful to look at the why of meaning. Especially in the current age, there's a tendency to focus on money, status, power, and pleasure rather than a meaningful life. But, according to Frankl, these pursuits are ways to cope with an existential vacuum. They are a consequence of a lack of meaning. In a society highly concerned with pursuing pleasure and achieving wealth, it's often difficult to realize that these pursuits don't fill our existential emptiness and are only cheap substitutes for what truly matters. A more direct approach for dealing with the pain of meaninglessness we see today is the pursuit of happiness. In some circles, like the good vibes only movement, happiness has even become a requirement. Frankl describes a characteristic of American culture. One is commanded and ordered to be happy. There's nothing wrong with happiness, of course, as happiness is probably the ultimate pleasant state of mind and the eventual byproduct of following, for example, Stoic and Buddhist teachings. But, so argues Frankl, happiness itself cannot be pursued, as it must ensue. I quote, "One must have a reason to be happy. Once the reason is found, however, one becomes happy automatically. As we see, a human being is not in pursuit of happiness, but rather in search of a reason to become happy. Last but not least, through actualizing the potential meaning inherent and dormant in a given situation." End quote. The same goes for success, according to Frankl. Success must also ensue and not be pursued, as it's the unintended side effect of one's dedication to a more significant cause. It must happen. The more we care about it, the less we can focus on our cause, and the less likely success will occur. But if we dedicate ourselves to a purpose and don't care about success, the more likely it will happen as a byproduct in the long run. So it seems that meaning is at the root of happiness and success, and the lack of it at the heart of indulgence in and addiction to pleasure, money, fame, and power. Having explained this, let's take a look into the how of meaning. First of all, according to Frankl, the meaning of life depends on the person, the moment, and circumstances. So there's no one-size-fits-all type of meaning that suits everyone at any time. He compares the futile quest for general meaning to a question posed to a chess champion. "Tell me, master, what is the best move in the world?" There is none. The best move in chess depends entirely on the situation in the game and the characteristics of one's opponent. We cannot invent the meaning of our existence, but we can detect it. As Frankl stated, meaning is inherent and dormant in a given situation. We can discover our purpose only if we interact with the world or determine what the world needs. Frankl wrote that we find out the meaning of life in 3 different ways. 1. By creating a work or doing a deed. 2. By experiencing something or encountering someone. 3. By the attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering. The first one lies in achievement and accomplishment. Creative pursuits like writing a book, painting, sharing stories about our sufferings and life experiences, or solving today's problems with science and technological inventions can help others. We'll only find out when we get started and engage with the world, so other people's needs become apparent. The benefit of performing good deeds doesn't need an explanation. But it probably doesn't have to be grandiose. Even sharing a small piece of bread with a starving inmate can be a profoundly meaningful experience. The second one lies in the connection we have or find with people and things. The experience of life itself, caring about the environment and its people, can be meaningful in itself. Frankl describes this as love, as he argues that it requires love to know something or someone truly. I quote, "The second way of finding meaning in life is by experiencing something such as goodness, truth, and beauty, by experiencing nature and culture, or last but not least, by experiencing another human being in his very uniqueness, by loving him." End quote. The third one lies in finding meaning in suffering. Frankl gives an example of an elderly practitioner who consulted him because of his severe depression after losing his wife. Instead of telling him what to do, he asked, "What would have happened, doctor, if you had died first and your wife would have to survive you?" "Oh," he said, "for her, this would have been terrible. How would she have suffered?" Frankl pointed out that the doctor's wife has been spared from such suffering as he spared her by paying the price, that he has survived and now mourns her. We cannot bring back the dead. In many situations, like being imprisoned in a concentration camp, there isn't much we can do about the external factors. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves, Frankl stated. By changing our attitude, we can turn adversity into triumph. We can find meaning, even within the worst sufferings imaginable. The philosophy of Viktor Frankl could perhaps be summarized like this. Finding something to live and even die for transforms a meaningless, hopeless existence into a life worth living, regardless of any circumstances. Hence, he quoted Nietzsche saying, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Thank you for watching.
All right, so you may or may not have ever heard of Man's Search for Meaning, and I realize that it's a little bit more than what we're going to talk about in terms of meaning and purpose in work is sort of where we're going. This sort of bridged on the spiritual and this existential idea about meaning, and it felt important to me for us to watch that and to kind of think about where we find our meaning and how other people can find it in different places. And I think about it a lot with this kind of, he connects it, or the video creator connects it to this sort of push in consumerism that we are lacking meaning in our lives, and so much that we are seeking to cope with this lack of meaninglessness by buying things or having experiences or doing whatever. And I think there's a lot of truth in that, because I see clients, I see a lot of young people who are saying, I don't want to just work, a 9-to-5 job that I'd hate, to come home to take, I don't want to go to school and spend a lot of money and get student loans to get a degree for a job I'm going to hate, that's not going to bring me any joy in my life. And so I almost kind of see a push for trying to find more meaning. And certainly I'm not saying nobody should go to school or work. We live in a society, we need people to take jobs. And I think you can often try to find a way to pick up meaning that maybe meaning and purpose that others might not necessarily see, as Viktor Frankl was able to find meaning and purpose in a place that felt very much like you wouldn't be able to do that there. I think it just depends on the person. So yeah, let's move on. So what makes for a meaningful life? Well, when one is living a meaningful life. You feel engaged, you're connected to a purpose, and you're able to connect your actions and passions to your values. And so those pictures, I wish I could give this credit. I often use an exercise with people in my career development when I teach it to kids. It's a workplace values exercise, and I don't know where it came from. My previous job, it was just what they'd always used, and I still have a copy of it, but I can't figure out where it came from. It's in a book somewhere. But so, the pictures are sort of things like sometimes adventure might be a value that brings you meaning in your life, or family is what brings you meaning and purpose. For me, friendship, that's another one, creativity, moral consistency and justice, sort of like that, the fight to be an advocate for people who need that. And then of course, knowledge, that's one that's definitely important to me as I continue my PhD. But even before that, I have taken a tax class just to learn how to do taxes. I have, I've always taken classes. I worked in higher ed for a while when I couldn't find a job as a counselor in schools. And so I ended up working in financial aid, and I would take classes, and my colleagues would look at me and they'd be like, "Why are you taking classes?" And I'd say, "Well, because they're free." Like, I just have always wanted to learn things. If you offered me a free welding class tomorrow, I think that'd be a fun thing to learn how to do. I always want to keep learning more things. So what I want you to think about is sort of what brings meaning in your life, and what are your values, and how are you living those values? And if you don't know the answer to what makes my life meaningful, maybe start with what are the things that I value. And maybe that might help you answer that question. So why do we need a purpose? Well, research says that when we have a purpose, it helps us to live longer, to keep our cognitive faculties a little bit longer, and that we take better care of ourselves. If I think about that video, I'm not at all surprised that the people who didn't have meaning or a purpose in their lives in those horrible, horrible conditions in the concentration camp would end up getting sicker. They'd be more stressed, more anxious, and that they would ultimately end up passing away earlier than the people who maybe had a purpose, if they, could stay alive. They say that youth who have a purpose report higher levels of happiness. They also do better academically. And it doesn't matter what the purpose is. So whether, their purpose, let's say, was making money, that's fine. Or if their purpose is making art or helping others, or, having some fun experience, whatever the purpose that person wants, if they have it, that makes us a little bit happier. And I really was struck by this kind of sad statistic. And again, this is one study, but they found that they say only 30% of adults identify a strong purpose in their life. And of course, those that did identify that have a higher purpose, have scored better on positive adaptation and positive developmental measures. And they also found in their study that the people of color tended to have a little bit more purpose. That number was higher than 30% than the average. And they speculated that perhaps that was because they had higher either community involvement or religious factors. So not necessarily that being a person of color will give you more purpose, but that there might be other covariates that is more common among those people. I'm sure you have seen this ikigai, which I think is a Japanese idea of kind of marrying the multiple things, what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what we can find a way to get paid for. And that if you can find the intersection of all of those things, that maybe that is the answer to what is our purpose. And again, maybe the paying part, if we didn't live in the kind of world that we live in, maybe that wouldn't be that important. But given that we do, it is nice when you can find something that is all of those things. Or if you can't find something that's all of those things, you can find a purpose, even if it is not necessarily at work. So I'm going to show you a little clip. And if you're my age, you've probably seen this episode of The Simpsons. The premise, if you'll recall, is that Homer had quit his job at the nuclear power plant after, well, maybe not after Lisa was born, but before they had Maggie. And he got his dream job working at the bowling alley. And apparently I don't know. I think he had to quit it because he needed more money. And so he had to go back to get his job back at the power plant. So that's where we join him.
Uh-oh, acid rain again. Oh.
Yes? Are you a new applicant?
Actually, I quit and I came to get my job back.
Through there.
So, come crawling back, eh?
Seems like the classy thing to do would be not to call attention to it. Thanks for giving me my old job back.
I'm afraid it's not that simple. As punishment for your desertion, it's company policy to give you the plague.
Sir, that's the plaque.
Ah, yes, the special demotivational plaque to break what's left of your spirit. Because you see, you're here forever. Don't forget, you're here forever.
Oh. I've never been so miserable in all my life. But I can't take it out on Marge and the kids. I've got to carry the burden all by myself. Hi, honey. How are you?
Well, actually...
Oh, I can't go on with this charade any longer. I hate my job, I hate my life, and ever since I found out about this baby, there's been nothing but bad luck.
My contraction started an hour ago.
It's just in one ear and out the other with you, isn't it, Marge? It's wonderful. It's magical. Oh, boy. Here it comes. Another mouth.
One more push should do it.
Marvelous.
Congratulations, Mr. Simpson. You have a beautiful, healthy baby.
Okay. Huh?
Homie, I think someone is saying hello.
Hello. Oh, it's a boy. And what a boy!
That's the umbilical cord. It's a girl.
A girl! Oh, Marge, we have a wonderful baby girl. Not just a girl. The most beautiful baby girl in the whole world. Come on, Marge. Show a little enthusiasm. Mwah.
So you loved her right from the start.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then why no pictures?
Oh, there are pictures. I keep them where I need the most cheering up.
Sorry, I just felt like I wanted to play that for you because when I thought about finding a reason to go into a job that maybe is hard, sometimes the job itself is your purpose, and sometimes your purpose is the love of your family and to support them, and so you can find meaning in a different place so that you can help to get through the thing that you don't love so much. So when I think about that, we think about this idea of work orientation. And so your job orientation, if you are job oriented, rather, there's three categories here. There's job oriented, career oriented, and calling oriented. So if you are job oriented, it's done for the paycheck. It's not done, because you really like that job or for any particular purpose. It's a means to an end. It's either, based on the kind of skills that you have or what is available in your town, maybe the hours that are good for you. You clock in, you clock out, you're just getting paid, right? So Homer is probably job oriented. Career oriented, the goal is sort of to maximize your income, either your social status, your power, your prestige, to move up in the world. And so I think that Mr. Burns maybe would be career oriented. I certainly don't know that he is calling oriented. Calling oriented, I think a lot of people, teachers, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, are calling oriented, but it not necessarily. But if you are calling oriented, you kind of think that you're in it because it contributes to some greater good. It makes the world a better place. It's worth doing in its own right. And I think about this for myself. I'll share a little bit. I said before that I worked in higher ed when I couldn't get a job as a school counselor. When I graduated in 2009 and I got a job, and then I met my husband and I moved, and then I just could not seem to find a job as a school counselor in 2011. And I was heartbroken. I was crushed, genuinely. I wanted to do that job more than anything in the world, and I would have done it for free. Like that, if somebody would have let me come do the job for free, and I didn't, yes, I certainly wanted to get paid for it, and I deserve to get paid for it. But, when you think about that question, sort of that office space question of what would you do if you had $1 million? I think it would still be something in the field of counseling or the field of education. I think it doesn't matter. Yes, I certainly like pay, and it helps my quality of life. And it's not certainly why I went into it, and not why a lot of people go into teaching. And so those who are calling oriented seem to have a higher life satisfaction on average. They invest more time at work, which we talked about some dangers of maybe overworking. So I'm not saying to do that. They tend to be maybe a little bit more conscientious and maybe a little bit more optimistic about life, because they have that sort of purpose comes from their work. Again, your purpose doesn't have to come from your work, but if it does, and that's what you do 40 plus hours a week, way more than that for educators, then it tends to make you a little bit more optimistic. Unsurprisingly, teachers who are calling oriented have a more positive workplace attitude than those who are maybe either career oriented or job oriented. I don't think often that people end up in the teaching field if they are just job or career oriented, but we all have met people who've either lost their passion for it or find that it's just not a good fit. They thought that they would like it, and that's true in lots of jobs. And I want to be clear that these are not, a lot of people associate teachers with calling oriented kind of work orientations. Teachers, doctors, counselors, all nurses, those kinds of things. And I want to be clear that it's not occupation specific. There are doctors who are in it for the money and or for the prestige or for the power. And then there are people who do the jobs that you would not consider you could have a calling for, and they find that purpose. So I was reading something while I was doing research, and there was a janitor in the hospital who, when asked about his meaning and his purpose, he finds that he thinks of himself as a part of the larger system. I keep the hospital clean so that the people who are trained to be doctors can do the helping and the healing and the saving of lives. And I think that's I don't know if I'd say it's rare, but I think it's a really interesting concept to think of, because I think a lot of people, and it's partially what I think maybe is wrong with society in some ways, is that we look down on certain careers as if it's not valuable in some way, or that you shouldn't want to do that. And then of course we realize that when the garbage collectors go on strike, that there is a collapse of the whole system. And we think, well, yeah, somebody has to do that. And, we should pay a fair wage and all of those things. I believe I once met a man. He was the facilities associate. I used to work in that time where I was not working in education. I worked as a human resource manager, and he was my facilities associate, and he cleaned that store and he kept it pristine. And he genuinely just was happy and joyful to be there every day. And I don't know, I wish I'd asked Mr. Charles if, he thought of that as a calling or not, but it felt to me like a job. He cleaned the toilets. He cleaned the toilets with a smile on his face every day. And I feel like he must have felt that there was a purpose in that work, or he is just the world's most joyful man. So where do educators get their meaning? So these are some phenomenologies where the researchers essentially interview teachers, South Africa and Australia, I believe, and they found some themes among the people that they interviewed. And again, these are kind of smaller samples because it's a qualitative interview, but the themes seem valid to me, and I'm curious if they will seem valid to you, that they defined meaning as having a sense of purpose. They said it was having a positive impact on someone larger than themselves. That's what they found meaning in their education. A lot of them, nearly 80%, which again, there's only 20 of them, but most of them endorsed an idea in some way in their interview about this transfer of knowledge. The idea that they wanted to be a part of teaching a future generation something. A lot of them identified cultivating positive relationships as a part of how they found meaning at work, both with students and with their colleagues. Trust, when students and their team trust them, that brought them meaning and purpose. Some of them identified tangible results like exams or scores, or knowing that their students graduated and went on to get, certain jobs or whatever. And then being appreciated brought them meaning as well. In the other study, very similar things. Meaning was made out of having a positive impact, providing the students with the learning opportunity. That's that sort of transfer of knowledge piece from the other one. The social support to colleagues, the relationships with students, improving their own pedagogical knowledge. So again, that's sort of the that idea I talked about earlier, where learning and growing and developing. And there were multiple meanings for each participant. And so I think that's the part that's important to remember, is if you have a job, especially one that is as difficult as the one that you are all doing, if you can try to find multiple meanings, so that most days, maybe not every day, you can find some part of your job that leads to that purpose. And then the unfortunate part that we, of course, need to acknowledge is that usually the parts of our job that bring us meaning are not the parts that we spend time on. You have to prep for a test, or you have to prepare students for a certain kind of thing, and that isn't necessarily what brings you joy and meaning. As a counselor, it may be that instead of getting to sit with students and be with students and counsel them, I have been assigned to fix everybody's schedule, right? That's a task of a high school counselor. And maybe it's not the piece that brings me the most meaning, although I could reframe it, which we'll talk about in a minute, in terms of, knowing that crafting that schedule is going to help my student to be successful. I can frame it that way, and maybe it will make me feel like it's a little bit more meaningful. Keep losing my cursor. Okay, this is a very brief video on the concept of job crafting.
From our choice of coffee, to our clothes, to our cars, we personalise all aspects of our lives. However, one area of our lives we are not often encouraged to personalise is our work. Research has shown that when we personalise something, we value it up to 2 times more than something that comes off the shelf. Job crafting encourages people to proactively personalise their work to make it a better fit for them, much like a semi-tailored suit. So why does job crafting matter? Adopting a tailored approach to work has a multitude of benefits. Job crafting enables people to thrive in their work, boosting feelings of confidence, happiness, and even having a positive impact on physical health. Job crafting also stimulates personal and professional growth and development, and has been linked with career progression and satisfaction. Additionally, job crafting fuels performance by impacting motivation, productivity, and innovation. There are 5 core forms of job crafting. Task crafting involves making changes to the tasks and activities that make up a job, including redesigning, adding, or removing tasks. Purpose crafting involves reflecting on the meaning of our role and how our work aligns with our personal values. Shaping how we connect with our colleagues and amplifying the relationships which matter to us is known as relationship crafting. Wellbeing crafting encourages us to find and create opportunities to boost physical and mental health through how we carry out our work. Skill crafting involves finding opportunities to develop, refine, or consolidate skills and knowledge. So how can we bring job crafting to life? In order to job craft, people need the opportunity and encouragement to make small changes to make their job a better and more personal fit with their strengths, passions, and interests. Research shows us that making these changes benefits not only the individual, but their colleagues, customers, and organisation too. To find out more about how to make work better, please visit our website.
All right, so we'll talk a little bit more. So those are the sort of the authors and the people behind the idea of job crafting, which they defined as the physical and cognitive changes people make in the task or relational boundaries of their work. She gave 5 kinds. I've seen a differentiation. Some people only give it 3. The first 3, others add in the other 2. And for some reason, I didn't add in that last one. My apologies. So formal task crafting, how the work is conceptualized and carried out. Relational job crafting, how often, who you interact with at work. Cognitive crafting, how you ascribe meaning and significance to your work. Context crafting, where is the work taking place? What's the environment like? And then they talked about well-being crafting in the video. And that would be the idea of maybe what you all have chosen to do by taking this class. You are crafting and adding well-being into your life as an educator. You craft by adjusting either the job demands, which are those aspects of your job that require sustained efforts and are associated with certain costs, and or the job resources, so the aspects of the job that help you do your job, or resources. I liked this definition at the bottom, which with my captions, I'm not going to be able to read it. It's a process of self-initiated redefining and reimagining relational, behavioral, and cognitive work engagements in personal meaning. I can't read the last word. About meaningful ways, that's what it says. If I stop talking, then I can see the bottom of my slide. It's very late, my apologies. So yeah, you'll see that there are 5 different kinds in my little visual here. The research says that job crafting was specifically with teachers, when teachers were allowed to collectively as a group redesign their jobs. Obviously not all aspects of education, but in some ways they were able to have some control that related to positive job outcomes and organizational outcomes. Teachers who crafted more job resources experienced higher levels of work engagement. And so I think it can often feel like we do a job that is sort of really prescribed, and there's lots of pressure coming from different places about how to do it. And there are some small things that we could try to do to change pieces of the job. So this was another study that said that job crafting has a positive impact on well-being. And that is to say that they gave these work-life questionnaires, which is why I have that lovely visual there. We talked earlier about the orientations, job, career, and calling. And so they asked teachers, primary school teachers in Croatia, about which one of those they had. And then they gave them a job crafting scale, a work meaningfulness scale, and a flourishing scale, and found a significant correlation between calling orientation and work meaningfulness, calling, and flourishing. And they found that a sense of calling led the teachers to craft their jobs by increasing their resources, their structural resources, creating opportunities for professional development. And then that gave them more autonomy, which in turn filled their work with meaning and purpose, which made them a little bit happier. So that's kind of tying it all together. If you're able to job craft, you might feel, and by increasing your resources, a little bit more meaning in your work. So what does it look like in education? So crafting the what, there are a couple of blogs, which I don't know why I didn't tag them in here. I'll try to put them in before I post the slides. And educators who've been looking at this for a while have thought about how to do job crafting in this field, thinking about the tasks that maybe you dislike and trying to find a way to either change them or take a little bit less time, do them a little bit more efficiently. And so, for example, if you, the easiest one, and I'm sure you all know, you can think of this, is, if you hate to grade really complicated rubrics, you can make them a little bit simpler, right? And so just easier to grade, it takes less time. I found that one thing I really disliked grading presentations after I had seen them. And so I had to learn to grade while the students were presenting, because it just became so much, it took so much less time to do it that way. And if I had the rubric all laid out, I could watch the presentation and score as I was going. And obviously, if it came with a proposal or a slideshow, I could go through and add some comments about it later, but not having to rewatch the whole video of the presentation. You can outsource. So thinking about, are there tasks that you have that you could either find an electronic way to do them, or you could assign them to somebody else who might be able to do that. If you have a students, you've what's it called? In the high school, sometimes we get teachers' assistants, students who are assigned to help with different things, and assigning them to do the pieces that A, they're capable of doing, and B, that you don't care so much for. If you are not an incredibly creative person and you can assign some really creative students to design your bulletin board, that just saved you time, right? You can make the space. We talked about our context. You can still make it a beautiful and lovely space, and you didn't have to do any of the work if you can find a way to sort of outsource that. Similarly, thinking about parent volunteers or just other ways you can make the job easier. And, I don't know exactly what that might be, but automated systems, maybe like the class dojo, is a way to be able to contact parents pretty quickly and easily, so that you don't have to spend all day calling, as nobody answers their phone anyway. Crafting the who, or the relational crafting. So leaning in to create moments with our colleagues or the people that bring you energy, if they bring you energy. If people bring you energy, building those social connections with your community and your school and your colleagues. And if you're an introvert and that doesn't bring you energy, leaning out from that and spending your time having, the ability to recharge and, focusing in on what brings you joy and makes you less stressed out. A lot of teachers think about this last part, mentoring and creating relationships with students, since a lot of us, as those studies tell us, and I know it's true of all of you, you get meaning from helping your students. And so finding a way to do that so that you're doing it more frequently. And so in some places that might look like volunteering to be, and maybe not volunteering, I shouldn't say, but finding a way in your advisory, if you're assigned to be an advisory instructor, and to build meaning with your students or build relationships with your students, just getting to know them out on the playground or in the classroom or in lunch, wherever it is that they are, getting to build those relationships will maybe bring you a little bit more joy. I certainly think you're already doing that. I don't think that this is news to any of you, but just reminding yourself that even though you might be stressed and you might be trying to grade, that building that relationship, if you can take some time to do that with your students, that maybe that will rejuvenate you in a way that you're in the moment you're stressed out and you're not thinking of that. And if you can reframe it in your mind to say, oh, right, I know that, this stopping for 5 minutes in the hallway to talk to this kid may bring me enough joy that I'll be able to go back rejuvenated and not put my head in my hands and grade that last, couple of tests or whatever it is. And again, easier said than done. I realize that. Crafting the why, or the cognitive reframing. So again, focusing on the pieces you can control rather than the pieces that you can't control. So I really liked this idea, the last part, focusing on service, which is like the reframing of your actions. I don't know about you, I hate calling parents. It's not my favorite thing to do. And if I can reframe it within the idea of my why, which is that I'm here for students, calling that parent of a kid who's struggling is going to help me to build the relationship with the parent and the family. Hopefully it's going to help the student to, we can talk together and brainstorm what's going on for them. And it's going to help me feel better about doing my job because we're all working together. So trying to reframe maybe even the tasks that we really dislike, like I said, making schedules. If I can reframe that to, me fixing this child's schedule is going to help them to feel like they've got all the things they need for their college and career plan, and then they'll go out and be successful. So yeah, I think this might be my last slide, I hope, since I promised that just a second ago. think about your job, what you can do even in the smallest ways to improve it. Are there tasks that you think you can change? Are there relations or relationships that you could adjust? And certainly, you know, when I think about that one, I think about the times I've worked in schools, and there are some people that maybe bring me down and that I wish I didn't have to spend my time with. And even that, is there a way that I can choose to focus my time with people who are more positive versus negative? Am I going to eat lunch with this group of people or with this group of people, or alone if I'm an introvert and I want to just take some time to decompress? So are there changes that you could make in that way? And I know some of you have made some even bigger changes, which is to say maybe the relationships you have at your current school were not great, or the one you were at before, I should say, and you've made a change. You've decided to move on to a different position in hopes that you'll have better relationships and more purpose and meaning with that new location. What cognitions can you alter? How can you reframe, if you think about the tasks and the jobs that you really dislike, how can you reframe that to be more about your purpose and your meaning? And thinking then, of course, about what resources you need, paying attention to what's in your control and what's not. And then, of course, I know this is the question that sometimes will make you emotional. What makes it hard to job craft as an educator? What are the barriers that you're facing? And maybe in the discussions, others will have some thoughts about things that they've done or could do. I didn't put any reminders, doing a terrible job. Reminders. Let's see, Monday is our last live class. John and I are going to be together. Tuesday is the pub quiz. If you are not able to attend that, do not worry. You can watch the video later and you'll just turn in the results from the pub quiz. The quiz is due today. If you need me to keep it open longer than that, please let me know. And the lesson plans are coming due soon, at least the first one. You should be working on that. Again, everything has a deadline of August 18th. And so know that I'm giving you deadlines, but you don't necessarily have to turn them in by then. Same thing with the discussion boards or with any of the assignments that you have done. At a certain point, I might start emailing you and asking you. Again, I apologize. I'm way behind on my grading. This class is intense for you all. It's also intense for John and I, because every day there's a discussion board, which we wanted and which is a little bit overwhelming to manage. And I really appreciate all of you being willing to roll with us on that, and that you are so active and communicating with each other to keep that lively discussion going. If you have any questions about any of the things I didn't put reminders in here, my apologies for not having them on a slide. It is 11:07 p.m. So I'm not going to redo this. I will see you all on Monday, hopefully. And if you've been just watching us, I wish you, I hope you're watching these videos from someplace lovely, because I have not gotten out as much as I would like to. And feel free in the discussion boards, if you're ever so inclined to, if you're watching the videos or posting from somewhere beautiful, a lake or the mountains, to drop a photo in there, because I love to see that, since I have not managed to get out. Thank you so much, and I'll see you all soon.